Scope gonna cooperate. Oh, yeah. All right. We're live.
Okay, here we
You guys
go.
are tagged. Let's do it. Cool. Oh, yeah. There's my voice. That's annoying. All right. Everybody's coming in. Jeannie, what's going on? Naveen, what's going on? You guys, do one of you guys mind speaking real quick before we get going? Just so I can
Nicholas?
see. Chat, can you hear them speaking? Let me know.
I can hear you. I can hear Nick. I can hear everyone. I can hear the people that I need to hear.
Same here.
There we are. I'm just going to wait for one more second, get that confirmation, because audio is so fun to work with. It's, you know how many streams I've done that haven't had audio? It's like the most embarrassing thing.
The worst is when you go like 10 minutes in and you're talking and you're like, oh, wow, no one can hear me. Or like for me, it's been like one mic works and the other mic doesn't work. And it's like, oh, this is a monologue.
Alec will help us out. You're OTG's Alec.
Yes. I got my OTG gear on right now, too.
There you go. I don't have any gear. I should have geared up. I don't even know if Netspeedly has anything.
Kendrick Lamar t-shirt.
Ooh!
Oh, okay, Jack.
There we go. All right. Let's see here. Cool. I'm going to get her going. All right, so we're sounding good. You guys ready to do this?
Yes,
sir.
All right. Welcome, everybody, to Basketball and More with Matt Brooks, episode 3. We have made it to 3 episodes without getting canceled. What a day. I have 2 of my this quarantine period. Let me see. I don't know if my audio just cut out. But yeah, guys, I've been working with a lot during this quarantine period, doing a lot of season in reviews, talking about many, many players. OTGs, Jack Manuell, Nick Fay, how are you both doing? We're from all over the world right now, right?
Yes, we are. Super happy to be here, Matt. Happy to be part of episode 3. And it's been fun working on some net stuff. Now we're going to jump into some general NBA stuff, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
3 people, 3rd episode. I mean, it just all works out well, doesn't it? It works out perfectly.
It's going to be great. The fun part about doing all these streams is just talking about, I mean, you know, I can do net stuff all day, don't get me wrong, but it's nice to talk about some other teams, and also if the playoff stuff, you know, does come back, which you never know, it seems like we're getting closer, I think. I can't really tell at this point.
Yeah.
Optimism.
Yeah, this is a good prepper. So let's get into it. Let's just, enough of the chatter, enough of the chit chat. Let's get into it. Which one of you guys going first?
I'm going first.
16, take it away.
Yes. So 16, going with your Orlando Magic here.
Wow.
Just not a ton of star power, obviously. Jonathan Isaac still being out. And I just don't think anybody's really fearing Orlando in a 7-game series. There's a lot of weaknesses to that team, especially offensively. And I just don't think anyone's like, oh, God, we're going to see Orlando. That's frightening.
Yeah, look, I have the exact same thing. I'm looking at this sort of, looking at this, the tiers. I love the tier thing. And if we were to do tiers of the playoff sort of rankings and power rankings, I think the Orlando Magic would be at the bottom in a ranking of their own. Purely because no, that's not a slight to the Orlando Magic, because you know what they did last year. They stole a game from the Toronto Raptors, the eventual champion. You know, that's nothing to sneeze at. So, but I think it's the talent that they have on their roster right now. I think Nikola Vucevic has had a little bit of a lesser season. I know you put a bit of a tweet out about him, Matt. Just a random tweet about Nikola Vucevic. Why not? But for me, I can't see them doing anything really dangerous. Maybe steal a game against the Bucks. I can't see them stealing a game against the Bucks. I think they would be really above themselves if they would actually lose by more than 5 points. To be honest, I'm pretty low on the Orlando Magic. But saying that, who knows what can happen?
D-Rock, this is a good one. Jonathan Isaac will, in 2 seasons, be Giannis's kryptonite. Unfortunately, no Jonathan Isaac. I actually did this under the assumption that the guys that were injured, maybe other than like a Ben Simmons, though anybody that was injured that ended the year that it seemed like a real serious injury was probably not going to come back. I mean, you know, I also have the Magic, you know, carrying up spot number 16. We're going 3 for 3 here. Not much scares me about them. You know, maybe, I mean, even last year in his career season, Vucevic was pretty marginally efficient. Their best player was Nets Twitter's favorite, you know, Aaron Gordon with 15.9 points last year. I mean, that's, I guess, what you're banking on. DJ Augustine declined a little bit this year, who was the only reason that they won a game last year in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much you can depend on with that. They, as Jack, you said it best, they're in their own tier in the worst way possible. So yeah, I think we're gonna go with that. Seems like we're all in agreement there. 15. Nicholas.
15 and 14, I think, are a little interesting. I went with Memphis here. Obviously, they got John Moran and they got the talent that kind of pops, which could maybe scare you, but lack of playoff experience, you're just like, am I really scared of this team that hasn't been to the postseason? They don't have a ton of guys. Maybe Jonas Valanciunas is a guy that's been there, but still, I could see some of these rookies or young players struggling in a playoff series.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Fay and I do a lot of podcasts together. We clearly have the same. You're probably not wrong there. So we do have the same NBA brains. Thinking of the sort of tier rankings here, I think 15 to 13, you could make an argument and shuffle them around anywhere. And I mean, we'll get to those sort of teams. But yeah, I think the youth, I think when it comes to playoffs, you have to lose one to win one. I think the Grizzlies have a chance if they were to come up against, say, the Lakers in a 1-8 series. Maybe they could steal a game. They did beat them in the regular season, but I think that was without Anthony Davis in one of those games at home. But they have talent, and that's the thing that I always look at when it comes to playoff series. What is your top-level talent? John Morant is a stud, and he's going to only get better. Jaren Jackson is a stud. He's only going to get better. Brandon Clark was probably one of the steals of the draft, and they're drafting. And Brooks on that new contract as well. They've got a nice team, and I think that they're going to be around the playoffs for a long time to come. Maybe they do a Sacramento Kings and they take a step back before they go forward. But I think the Grizzlies, you could argue, could be from 15 to 13. But for me, I had them at 15 as well.
Well, this is just, riveting stuff already. I am in agreement. The Memphis Grizzlies. Look, I like them a lot. They are a very fun team to watch. They kind of remind me of the Kings last year, where they play really, really fast, kind of catch guys by surprise. They were the 7th fastest team according to pace this year. I am a little skeptical of how it would look in the playoffs. They're just a little green for me. They traded away their vets, really mostly Solomon Hill and Jay Crowder at the deadline. But I do think that stuff is kind of important. I'm not sure. I guess the leader of that locker room is going to be Valanciunas. I have no idea how to. This is one of these names I'll never get right. But Valanciunas. They have him to potentially lead the locker room. And then because I'm annoying, I looked up stats on Synergy. John Morant, 37th percentile half-court player. I worry about that a little bit when the game slows down. But he showed that he can get his own shot in important games. I mean, we all saw it firsthand in one of the first games of the year for the Nets. So I like them. I think that they're a couple years away from really being, an interesting team. But I like Clark. I like Triple J, John Morant, Dylan Brooks, a bunch of guys I like. I just don't quite believe in them yet.
And I think Jaren Jackson would be a guy that just makes you a little bit nervous because he's so inconsistent. Yes. He'd be a guy that could pop in a series, but he also could be a guy that see get in foul trouble by the second quarter and play like 20 minutes a game in the series.
For sure. Yeah, the defense, like I looking through some of his defensive stuff recently, I've been super high on him for quite a while now, and the defense stuff is tricky. The fouling stuff that you mentioned is an issue for him right now. There are moments where he'll attack closeouts, and I'm like, ooh, this guy is nasty. Like, he's got a little, he's long, he moves well for his size, but I don't know if he's fully comfortable in his skin yet. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
I feel like he'll develop more into a center than a power forward, which he's been playing a lot now. His best position is definitely stretch 5, but if you can't protect the rim, he doesn't really rebound well either. You need to improve there.
Yep. And that's something they have to figure out with Clark as well too. They're different players. I mean, he's more of a role man, and I think you can absolutely make it work. But as you get further and further in the playoffs, your bigger lineups, if you will, shrink quite a bit. So that's another thing to keep an eye on. I don't know what that would look like, but Jenkins did a great job with them this year, so I trust him to figure that out. But,
and they're all super young, so we kind of mentioned, they're going to pop off. They're going to be a team in the playoffs for a while now.
Where would Jenkins be for you guys? Before we move on, Matt, where would Jenkins for you guys be in your Coach of the Year ranking? I know I've chatted this a little bit with Nick on the OTG outlet, but I'd had him quite high. I was probably a bit more optimistic because we look at expectations and what the coach does with the roster and can they exceed those expectations. A lot of people had the Memphis Grizzlies as being the worst team in the NBA, and they're a playoff team. that is, I don't think there is a person who has exceeded expectations as a coach more than Taylor Jenkins.
Yeah, I mean, he's killed it. I mean, he wouldn't be a guy that would win it just because you typically don't see an 8 seed, get coach of the year. But I think he'd at very least probably be top 5 just because, like you said, Jack, Memphis was a team I thought was going to be bad. I didn't think they'd be in the 8 seed. I thought maybe best case scenario was like 12th seed or something like that, 12th spot. So to see that jump, and then also the progress from a lot of young players. You don't typically see everybody jump in the same year. We saw a lot of guys improve.
They have a little bit more, they have a higher ceiling than my 14, but I also think they have a lower floor. Are you guys ready to do 14?
Yeah, and I think this is going to make some Nets fans sad. I'm going to go with the Nets here. Obviously, they don't have KD. They don't have Kyrie. You do still have Spencer and Karras who can pop off in a playoff series, but you're also still playing some guys that aren't necessarily amazing and playing them out of position a bit too. So the Nets defense will probably help them in a series kind of maintain things. But still, when you get to those ISO possessions, lacking that lockdown defender, I think could be a real issue for them. And like I mentioned, offensively, you have Spencer and Karras who are fringe all-stars and haven't necessarily proved consistently they can be at that all-star level. We saw Karras last year, but doesn't mean he'll do it again.
Yeah, this is what people came for. Brooklyn Nets chatter. I've got the Brooklyn Nets there as well. Looking at my list as well, if in a hypothetical world, we've heard Kevin Durant speak today. We literally did a podcast yesterday. We could do another one again today about him speaking to Weezy and Nets Daily dropping some nice new heat as well. I could have the Nets as high as 7 on my list if you had KD and Kyrie in there, maybe even 5. That is how much of a ceiling and a discrepancy there is when you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving on your freaking NBA basketball team. But they don't have those guys. This is not a hypothetical world we're living in right now. Right now, we're living with Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, and of course Joe Harris. So I think that in that sense, the imagination, 14th again, they're in that same sort of tier that I would have my next team in. I'm not going to reveal that just yet, but I think in a 2-7 series, one thing I am kind of confident with is that the Nets have always generally played quite well against the Toronto Raptors. I think the Raptors are an incredible team, and they are incredibly coached, and we would get phenomenally out-coached if Jacques Vaughn versus Nick Nurse. I think Nick Nurse is probably, talking about coach of the year, my coach of the year. But I still do think that just the guard play that we have, Jared Allen can pop off a little bit against, a Marc Gasol who can be a little bit lazy sometimes. So I think the matchup is okay if we were to come up against the Toronto Raptors and get straight into a playoff series, maybe steal a game or 2, maybe take it to 7. I think that's as far as it would go. But, in a more positive hypothetical world, the Nets actually get to the finals with KD and Kyrie. Maybe they get a chip. Who knows what could happen? That is how far the discrepancy is when you have one of the 10th, 15th best players in the history of the game on your team.
Yeah, I also have the Nets. We're killing it right now. I think it'll get interesting. I figured the late picks and the early picks, I guess like the 3 through 1 would be pretty similar.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have them. I tried not to think too much about matchups in a way. And even so, like, I just kind of think they're just where their talent is. I mean, ultimately talent wins out. So that's kind of the nice part about however you want to do this. And I think that for them, I was between, I had moments where I was like, do I want to pick the Grizzlies over them? I actually really like that they have 2 guys that are mostly looking to score in isolation in Karras and Spencer. I actually think that works a little bit better in the playoffs. In the regular
100%.
season, it might look a little clunky, but in the playoffs when it's slowed down and you're kind of looking around like, okay, so who's going to score? Who's going to, drive and kick? That's when you want somebody like a Karis LeVert on top of having a Spencer Dinwiddie. So I think that's a really nice thing for them. Again, the talent is just not quite there compared to some of the teams. There's, I think, another tier after this. These bottom 3 are sort of in their own tier. They don't have a ton of rotational flexibility. So I think you'd be forced to pretty much play one of DJ or Jared Allen at pretty much all times, unless you want to try to go Wilson Chandler at the 5. Not the greatest, results off that this season. It worked in stretches, but I didn't think it was like outrageous. And I think that in a way that inhibits them a little bit to have a slow plotting big in a lot of ways, especially with DJ. But Jared Allen, he'll close out, but he's not like a switchable center like some of the guys on these really, really good playoff teams. So I think that they're a little bit limited in what they can do. But what they do at a baseline is really solid, and I think it could win a game or two in the playoffs.
Yeah, the ISOs from Spencer and Karras, so especially when you're not going to get as many pick and rolls or pick and pops, it's going to be more of like do it on your own. That's a benefit. But like you said, Matt, they don't have necessarily like the matchup options. They can't really be like, hey, Toronto or Boston or Philly throws out some matchup with, X amount of different players and different skill sets. The Nets can't really go to their bench and be like, well, this guy will match up with him. We already know the weaknesses at the 4. You mentioned with the 5 position, not really any of those switchy guys. So it's just like they're just limited in what they currently have. Obviously, when you're missing 2 top 15 players, that's usually going to be the case.
Yeah, I also think that this would be a series where Pascal Siakam would probably burst onto the scene and really make his name heard, because who's going to guard him?
Wilson Chandler's the best bet.
Literally, Wilson Chandler, Torian Prince. I mean, if he can bring the heat that he brought to that Spotify track and the rap that he brought, then maybe, who knows what could happen. But I think, Pascal Siakam would be primed to sort of make a name for himself. I think the guard play is, the Nets certainly have the edge there, but we don't have the wing depth, and that's one thing. If you put Aaron Gordon on the Brooklyn Nets in this series, as we've spoken about, maybe on every single podcast that all 3 of us have done,
ever,
then maybe things change. But I think that's one area where the Nets, and I think as well, when you get into a half-court sort of series, as the NBA playoffs generally are, that's where I think that the Toronto Raptors are really going to hone it. I think their defense, Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet, despite their lack of size, are incredible defenders and would make things very, very hard for a Spencer Dinwiddie and a Caris LeVert. And a Chris Chiozza. Let's throw him out there as well.
Big shout out to Cheese. Got to do it. Let's move on. We got 13. I guess we have what? Math is failing me. We got 14. No. This 13 to go through. There we go. I'm there. I'm here. Okay. I'll let Nick go ahead on this one. Get us started. See if we have something different here.
So I went with the Pacers here. I just feel like they finished the season very weak. The Oladipo fit wasn't great coming back from injury, and just things weren't really flowing well for them. And I just feel like their lack of 3-point shooting, just the lack of star pop without Oladipo being fully healthy, they're just not a super scary team. And I just don't feel like they're a team that would win a first-round series pretty much in any matchup, maybe except Orlando or even possibly Brooklyn. But I would even say the Nets would have their best chance of winning against, the Pacers than, some of the other teams out there, just because they felt so out of sync.
Yeah, count me a Pacers believer in this one as well. But I have just a different sort of perspective. I think the collective of the Indiana Pacers is better than the other 3 teams we've spoken about, which is why they are the top of this sort of lowly ranked tier, because they have depth. Nate McMillan is coaching well enough, and I think that they have enough sort of collective depth in their 5 and then in the depth of their rotation that is better than the Nets, the Grizzlies, and the Magic. I would make an argument that probably out of these 4 teams, the Grizzlies have the individual best player in Ja Morant. I mean, you can make an argument for Spencer or Karras. But I think, and obviously probably Oladipo, Sabonis, those are guys that you can probably throw a name of, but those are all guys in the 35 to sort of 60 range of rankings of players in the NBA, that it's sort of just a toss of the coin. But yeah, for me, the Pacers play really good defense as well, play really good in the half court. So I think playoff basketball does suit them. But at the end of the day, when it comes to, you need the superstars out there, if I know that there is a healthy Victor Oladipo heading into this postseason, I have a really tough time. They would probably be in a tier of their own, and then probably within that next tier of players that we're going to get to. But for me right now, they're just at the top of this lowly tier. But they do have good depth, and they do have a decent enough starting 5 and good schemes that will probably bode well for them.
Here we go again. Oh man!
Now it's getting so interesting that we
really. I'm really happy we did this together. This is great.
Got some real different perspectives on the show.
There's no groupthink or anything here. Yeah, I put the Pacers down here. I toyed with a couple of teams. Ultimately, looked at it like this. Let's pretend this is like a 1 through 16 tournament. Teams are playing whoever. I just don't know if they have the best player in a series with any of the teams remaining. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Weird year for Malcolm Brogdon, kind of just like started off really hot and tailed off in a way that's so that kind of a weird year for them in that sense. I think people expected that backcourt to pop a little bit more. I like some of their I guess supplementary pieces, McDermott, Lamb, McConnell, some interesting players there, but this is really surface level analysis here. I just don't know if they have the best player in any series. And, I like Sabonis a lot, but I don't know. And another team that doesn't have a ton of flexibility, rotationally speaking.
And I just feel like they don't get the best out of Miles Turner.
No.
I think that's a real issue for them too. And I think if they were able to get more out of him or put him in a better situation, like they could go up and be a better team, because that's a guy that has a lot of talent and provides a lot of matchup issues because he is a switchy big, you know what I mean? Yep. And he can shoot the 3-ball, but it just seems like they don't really prioritize using him.
Would be a nice net, dare I say it.
Oh, I wonder if we've ever had that discussion.
I'm not doing any fake trades. We're swearing off that. 12. You guys ready?
Oh, 12. I have to refer to my list here just to double check, but I have OKC at 12. Now, this, like the next couple teams, I think I easily could switch, but it was between OKC and Miami. I just felt like OKC, they have Chris Paul, who's great, but then just like some of the other options on the roster and the guys they play, I don't feel super confident about.
Okay, I had the OKC a little bit higher. I had the Utah Jazz. Now, I'm getting somewhat spicy about it, probably having a team this low, but I think playoff basketball suits them. Offensively, they haven't really found a gear to sort of take that next step. Mike Conley was supposed to be that extra sort of cog to help the machine run a little bit smoother, and if anything, the machine has run a little bit more faulty with him there. Donovan Mitchell's had possessions taken away from him. Rudy Gobert is complaining about not getting touched in the pick and roll. I think that they have, maybe Jordan Clarkson would have to bail them out of a series, which I probably wouldn't be surprised about either. And I think that it's worth looking into the disharmony that's been happening in this offseason because of not the offseason, this sort of mini break that Rudy Gobert sort of started with Donovan Mitchell and the rift that remains there. Obviously they've sort of said that we'll put it aside and we'll get back and we'll win things. Joe Ingles is like, things are going to be okay. That they're teammates. We have the ultimate goal. But I also think that if we're looking at the sort of best player plus best collective, the teams that I probably have a little bit higher on this list, I would have probably 12 to 8 is my next sort of range where it's just like, throw the dice, chuck it around anywhere, make an argument for any of them. And I might actually be changing my list as we're going because I'm like, oh, maybe I had that team a little bit too high.
Right.
But for me, the Utah Jazz could be as high as an 8, but for me, they're as low as they are because of the lack of harmony, because I don't trust the offense. But again, might be the best defensive team because you've got the best defensive player, but Rudy Gobert as well. I can't name a series or a game in a series where he has been playing like important basketball. Like Clint Capella a few years ago was outshining him. So for me, the Utah Jazz are a lowly 12th. Finally, disharmony, disagreements. Yeah.
Back to the harmony. Back to the harmony, sort of. If I can get this to sit. All right.
I felt really bad about where I put the Jazz, and you guys just made me feel so much better. I was like, oh, God, I'm underselling them. They're so talented. But no.
Why so low? I mean, Nick, I've got the Thunder a few spots higher.
Me too.
Do you not trust a guy? For me, it was just like what we've sort of been speaking about, like the best player, the most proven player, team cohesion. Chris Paul. That's all I'll say. Chris Paul. Do you think that he's going to take another step back, or do you trust what he's done in the regular season, where he was literally the best clutch player, and clutch matters in the playoffs probably more than any other time?
Yeah, I think like their guard play is great in OKC. You got Chris Paul, you got SGA, you got Dennis Schroeder. I think after that, it gets a little bit concerning. Gallinari's had a nice season for them.
Love Gallo.
Yeah, and then, Steven Adams is good, but he's also somewhat similar to a Rudy Gobert in the sense where you can kind of expose him in space. And, I'm not high on their wings, and Harris Ferguson and Diallo and guys like that.
Dort?
Not really. Well, oh, yeah, not shooting.
Against Dort?
Not shooting the 3-ball. They're all kind of like the same similar skill sets, and I think that's what kind of worries me, where I think if we've seen in the past, if you have an undersized guard or you depend so much on your guards, it's a little easier to take them out of the game when you don't have the proper spacing around them. And I think they have some decent 3-point shooters, but it's not like they're full of elite guys. Like Gallinari is a guy that can light it up from 3. Their guards can shoot well. But after that, I don't know if you got the proper spacing to utilize all the guards on the roster.
Yeah, look, these two teams are really similar that we're debating between in a lot of ways. I like the backcourts. Well, sort of. If Mike Conley is actually the reason why I dropped them. With the Jazz, Donovan Mitchell was awesome this year. He was a 71st percentile scorer in the half court, which I think was a big question for me in a lot of ways. He just created his own shot a lot better. this year. If you want me to go through his stats, it's basically 24 points, 45, 36 splits. I like Bojan and Ingles in the playoffs. I think that they'll get sort of tossed around as like shooters in a way, but they have little like floater games. They're both able to involve the bigs in pick and roll, or really Rudy Gobert and Tony Bradley. So I like them a lot in theory. I don't like that their second best player is sort of phased out of every single playoff series he's in. And, the Conley thing is really weird. They're just better with Mitchell at point. And I don't know how you can take a guy which you gave up so much capital in a lot of ways and be like, hey, you're going to go play play on the bench now. I know they made it happen this year, but it's a lot easier said than done, when it's like comparing, hey, you're going to come off the bench for a couple games in January versus, hey, it's the playoffs. I think it would have been a big test for Snyder, and I don't know. I have questions with them. I know they've got the pedigree of being here for a couple years now, but they were a weird team that I think underachieved in a lot of people's eyes given their talent, and had to really sort of shake things up quite a bit in the middle of the season and cut guys that I think that they thought were going to be very productive for them. So
I think also like this could be a team you'd argue maybe is the most impacted by matchup, because if that team is putting out a stretch big or some type of spacing where they can expose Rudy Gobert, it's going to be such a difference. But I agree. I think Joe Ingles and Bojan are two guys that could have like an underrated impact in the series. We saw what Joe Ingles did to Paul George a couple years ago. So it's like, I think they have a little bit of like underrated playoff experience, but again, I don't know if you have full confidence in Donovan Mitchell being that playoff level closer yet. We've seen him close in the regular season, but we know playoffs are different.
Yeah, I think I'm going to piggyback on what Matt said before we get to our next one, in that I have more questions about the Utah Jazz than I have probably the other teams in that are probably in the next sort of 3 or 4 spots. The questions that I have that we've all discussed, and, I think the 3-guard play about the OKC Thunder, I think can actually be a bit of a strength for them. I think we've sort of seen at the Brooklyn Nets that, too many guards can sometimes work and sometimes not work, but they've proven that it can work and then some. And I think then when the quality of your guards is SGA and Chris Paul, and then sort of Dennis Schroeder being that sort of flamethrower, I think that they can be incredibly dangerous in the playoffs, and I would not want to see them.
So my next team is not the Utah Jazz. It's the Miami Heat. Just not a ton of confidence in Miami. Obviously, Jimmy Butler's like shooting woes have been a concern, and then also like the lack of playoff experience on that team. Still dealing with some injuries. I think Tyler Hero would be back if like the playoffs did start, but I'm not sure after like Bam and Jimmy how confident you feel about any other guy. We've seen like a 3-point shooter like Joe Harris get eliminated in a series. Same thing I think could happen to Duncan Robinson. And if you take away Butler, like who else is really creating things for Miami? You have Goran Dragic off the bench, but obviously health is a concern and consistency. So it's like, I'm not sure if Miami's just like talented enough. I can see them winning a first-round series, but I'd have a hard time seeing them get into round 2.
Yeah, I was all over the place with them. I couldn't figure it out in a lot of ways. They're a weird team where it's like a mix of like really old, like some older vets that I don't really trust all that much. Like Iggy, the early returns were not great. The Dragic thing is a question. And then it's like really, really, really young guys. Tyler Hero, Kendrick Nunn, who like could be awesome in the playoffs. He could also just be like, like chucking hilariously. Yep. I don't know. And then even Duncan Robinson, maybe you're able to smother that guy in the way that Philly did last year with Joe Harris. Sorry, I don't know why I do this every time with Jack. I didn't say that.
He's testing you, Jack.
But yeah, so I would worry a little bit about that. But I like the idea. I think that if they hit on all cylinders, I like them a little bit more than these middle teams. Jack, I'll pass it over to you since I rudely insulted your guy.
I have at 11 the Dallas Mavericks. Now,
okay.
I have the Heat a little bit higher because I believe in the collective. I believe in Jimmy, and I believe in Eric Spoelstra a little bit more. Plus, I don't believe in Tyler Hero and what he's doing in this quarantine with those shitty dreads and sliding into the DMs of Instagram models. I mean, I respect it, but, come on, man. You've got to be at least doing a couple of little...
He didn't slide in. He sealed the deal. Don't understand.
He literally just commented, and now he's like hanging out. So I'm like, is that legal? Are you allowed to be doing... I mean, Florida's a different base. I'm not even going to comment on that. But yeah, the Dallas Mavericks in this sort of lowly position, probably a lot of people say, and that probably goes against the ethos that I've sort of been saying, who's the best player? Luka Doncic is a top 5, top 6, top 7 player in the NBA right now. But I think we sort of go to what we said about the Memphis Grizzlies with youth and inexperience. You've got to win one to lose one. I think the Mavs, if in whatever playoff matchup that they have, could win the series. But I think right now, if they're 6th or 7th, they're going up against, the Los Angeles Clippers or the Denver Nuggets. If they get the Denver Nuggets, I reckon they could win that series quite easily. Yeah. But that's because I'm a little bit low on the Denver Nuggets. But for me, Kristaps Porzingis, and Luka Doncic, that's your core. And I think guys around that, guys like Seth Curry, I think the loss of Dwight Powell really hurts them. He was sensational for them offensively in the pick and roll and allowed Kristaps to play his more natural sort of fit.
Yep.
I know we're all big fans, especially Matt, of Maxi Kleber. I think he'd be good in the playoff series too. Tim Hardaway Jr., I think, has been playing some really inspired basketball as well. So I'm literally talking myself out of maybe the Dallas Mavericks here, but I just think that they have relying on guys that are 20, 21 years old, 22 years old, going against experienced sort of Western Conference teams, I think is a tick against them. Rick Carlisle's a great coach as well. I'm not sure I'm making the best argument for these guys to 11, but
you're arguing with yourself.
I just have them there. Leave it. The other teams that I have above them are better. Let's just go with that.
I agree.
I think they're better.
Yeah. You and I have the exact same list, 6 picks in. So we actually worked on this together. This is a group project.
Shared document.
They were in the Zoom call before I got here, guys. I don't know.
We're like, hey, let's make Nick feel bad about all his picks. Did I miss something here? No, I mean, I agree with you. It's weird because I like all their pieces. All the guys, you really hit it on the head here. I mean, I like their pieces. It's just the question of what that looks like first time really in the playoffs. I'm not sure what Porzingis looks like in his first real playoff atmosphere ever. Is he able to be more than just a pick and pop guy? Can he roll a little bit? Can he post up a little bit? I have questions about that. It was not, especially early on in the season, not great in that category. He definitely it's weird. I think Doncic missing some time actually really helped him because it just everything ran through him. Yeah. And when he came back after that, it really seemed like that they were clicking a little bit more than they had, which is interesting. You'd think that in playing together the whole year, that's what would sort of put them on the same page. But I think they both need to shine individually. And in saying all of that, that's why I'm concerned about it. I don't know if they're quite there with their chemistry. It feels like it's a couple of years away. So,
and KP's still not fully himself.
No,
maybe the rest could have helped him, but he's not the same guy we probably saw in New York. Dallas is going to be my next team for a lot of the reasons you guys listed. And I could see Luka also struggling in his first playoff series. Like, you don't get quite as many foul calls as you get during the regular season. I could see that kind of having some of an impact on him. Not that I think he would be terrible, but I could see him just not having the same level of success in the regular season, kind of needing a year to adjust. And also the same thing with KP, because we know he's not necessarily the most physical guy.
And we've seen Luka get frustrated a little bit at times during the regular season as well, not getting those calls. And I could see that happening again in the postseason, especially if Kristaps isn't stepping up. My next team I had was a team that Nick had a little bit lower. I had the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm relatively high on the Thunder. That's why they're probably the second team in this sort of tier for me. I think that the 3-guard play is a real weapon for them. I love Steven Adams, and that's not purely because of on-court things. Steven Adams is just a wonderful man, and I love his little sort of shimmy, the sort of the half-court He threw that basketball like it was a tennis ball. I don't know how the hell he just throws it, and he's gonna be making those shots in the playoffs. Absolutely no doubt. They're gonna be setting. They're gonna be making up sets for him. Billy Donovan. But I think that there's a lot of weaknesses there in terms of you have a decent enough high end, but then you sort of really drop off for the Oklahoma City Thunder. But when it comes to the playoffs, I think all you really need is a decent enough high end. You need a 7-8 man rotation essentially, and I think the OKC will probably have probably got 5 or 6 guys sort of set there already, and then you sort of chuck in whoever's going to be that 7th or 8th guy, whoever's sort of hot from 3, whoever's playing some decent defense, whoever is the better matchup for the Rockets or whoever it might be. So that's why I got the Thunder a little bit higher than Nick.
Here we go. We just once again agree. You guys have both nailed everything, which is why I had you guys on here in the first place. You've done all the hard work for me. I'm batting clean up here. The wing depth is the biggest thing that stands out to me. Nick, you touched on that a little bit. And the rotation, which my man, the J-Man hit right here. There's just guys that I'm not quite sure what that looks like when they're in the playoffs. You have guys like Ferguson, Diallo, Nader, all these guys that I just am not quite sure what they look like and what those roles look like. So I think that would be the biggest thing against them. I love Gallo. I love Chris Paul. And I believe in those guys more than I believe on really anybody that's before this list. So that's kind of what this turns into. And it comes down to, do you have the best 2 or 3 guys? I think right now, based on everything that we've seen from these teams that we have, I would say they definitely do. So that's where I'm at with the Thunder. Once again, you guys nailed it with this one.
I would say another weakness for OKC that would scare me would be like lineups they can put out that don't have weaknesses. Like we mentioned the wings, their lack of offense is kind of scary. And then like, oh, you want to rely on Gallinari, great offensive player, but he's not going to lock anyone down defensively. So I think like OKC's in a good spot. I feel a little bit better that you guys didn't like pick them like 5 picks down the line. I was a little worried there, but going to number 9, I went with the Houston Rockets. A lot of the reason is
James Harden stands. All right, I'm going to put this on Twitter. Nick doesn't like. I'm putting it out there.
That's cool. I don't care. I think just like the fact is Houston kind of started to tail off at the end of the season, and I just don't have a lot of confidence in not playing a center during a 7-game series.
Wow.
Like you're just asking PJ Tucker to get beat down, Robert Covington to get beat down in a more physical setting, and then obviously we kind of seen James Harden isn't necessarily the best playoff player, so not a ton of confidence in Houston. And I haven't really been sold on the Westbrook-Harden like duo because it feels like when Harden's playing well, Westbrook's not playing great. Westbrook's playing great. Harden's not playing as well. So I went with Houston here.
That's a
spicy. It is mildly spicy. I didn't have the Rockets that much hype. I had the Miami Heat here. I think that for the reasons sort of Nick outlined before in terms of weaknesses, you're relying purely on Jimmy Butler. I don't think we've spoken enough about Bam Adebayo. I think Bam Adebayo is primed just to continue to make leaps and leaps forwards. I think he's just a tremendously well-rounded player on both ends of the floor. And I think that the competitiveness, that Zach Lowe piece from a little while ago, just really sort of outlined. I'm like, wow, this guy's a beast when it comes to wanting to really make an impact. So I had the Heat here. I think that they can. I think, like I sort of mentioned about the collectives of a lot of teams, I think out of all the teams we've mentioned here, the collective makes the most sense. Partly because I think Eric Spoelstra just makes it work. And I think that coaching does matter more in the playoffs. When we're talking about guys like Nick Nurse, Taylor Jenkins, Rick Carlisle, all these sort of guys, Quinn Snyder, these are all really, really good coaches. But it has to be about the cuddle as well. How is the cohesion between those two things? And I think the Heat have a decent enough they have one of the best coaches in the league, and they have a decent enough 8-9-man rotation that I think would be dangerous enough. And Jimmy Butler is a very, very good playoff player. He's shown it. He's clutch. And maybe he might take a step back. He is getting older. But that man, until he proves otherwise, is going to be a very, very good playoff performer.
I also have the Heat once again. This is getting crazy.
I'm glad I'm here.
Yeah, it's great. Look, man, I kind of made the case against them, and I think a lot of people are really, really high on the Heat. I would just like to mention their defense really, really tailed off after kind of really the turn of 2020. I think they finished, well, by now they were, as of today, I should say, they were 14th in defensive rating, which is a little bit troublesome. I think that given some of the guys on that roster, you'd expect a little bit more. But again, the pieces are a little green. I like Bam. I could almost be talked for the Thunder over the Heat. I really could be, because I just don't know. Let's make this fun. I'm going to flip those two. Yeah, I'm going to do it right here. I just think that the pieces, the top 2, 3, 4 guys on the Heat, I'm just thinking about it out loud right now. I actually might like OKC's pieces a little bit better. So
if we're going Bam, Jimmy, and Goran Dragic, the best player, I guess, just talent-wise. I don't know, give me another name if I'm wrong.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
And we're going SGA, Schroeder, Chris Paul.
And Gallo.
And then you got Steven Adams too. I think, it's like they're top 5 versus, Miami's top 5. I think that was an easy swap. Like that's one where you could see the difference.
Yeah.
Maybe you have more confidence in Jimmy Butler in terms of like playoffs and what he can do. He's just probably as clutch as Chris Paul. The numbers might not back it up, but all of us have seen him just go to the free throw line like religiously in the last 2 minutes of a game without even really trying. And he was a really good postseason player last year too.
Yeah. So I'm going to stick with that. The toss-up between Jimmy and Chris is interesting. I love how I'm calling him Chris, like we're good friends. Chris, I guess.
He's going to join the call in a little bit, actually.
It's like, wow, really cool list you guys have got there. It's very similar all the way through. So, yeah, no, I like this. I think that would be a really good series between those two. If you could make a 1-16 type of look, having those two teams play each other, that's gonna go 7. I think if you play that series 50 times, it'll probably go 7-43 of them. So yeah, I think it would be a pretty good series, and I think that's a good toss up. But that's what I'm sticking with. We ready to move on to 8?
Yes, I have the Utah Jazz finally. So not too far from you guys, but I just felt a little bit more confidence in like the talent and the collective, like Jack's been mentioning. And I think if Mike Conley didn't play well, I think they would bench him. It's the postseason; they don't really care. Worst case scenario, they have to move him again this offseason. Maybe they try to acquire Chris Paul from OKC or something like that. So I got the Jazz here. Don't think they're a real contender, but I could see them winning a playoff series. Like I said earlier, I think matchup is a huge factor for them because if the team they're facing isn't exposing Rudy Gobert to the highest extent, he's still a really, really good player. It's just like going up against a Houston team that's going to consistently try to get switches, pull them out to the perimeter. It's also on Utah and Quinn Snyder. They've seen it for the last 2 years. All right, make adjustments. We know you're a good coach. Find a way to make use of one of your best players.
What I guess Nick is essentially saying is that Donovan Mitchell is better than James Harden. I'm just saying.
That's not what I said.
He literally said that.
I did not say that. He's trying to get me attacked online right here.
There's going to be plenty. We know Houston Rockets Twitter can get a little bit fiery. We've had, Mo to Kill. We know Dalton gets a little bit fiery with his Houston Rockets takes as well. I think it's a little bit I think you are so damn low on James Harden and Russell Westbrook, and I think that's a little bit unfair. I think Russell Westbrook is probably as reliable as Donovan Mitchell in the playoff series, to be fair. I'm not concerned about those guys. It's just like, you're going in a 7-game series in like the toughest environment that you're going to be in, and we already saw Houston kind of tail off towards this like no center thing that they were doing. PJ Tucker is super strong, but like you're asking him to bang every single night. You're asking all these guys to bang. We know D'Antoni doesn't really get deep into his rotations either. I just like don't have confidence in the whole team. And like James Harden, fine. Like he hasn't really showed up in the postseason. He's had good like games 1, 2, and 3, but then when you get 4, 5, 6, and 7, the workload gets too heavy for him. Maybe the rest would have really helped him, but I just like don't have super confidence in those guys, and their efficiency isn't great at all times. I know Westbrook shooting crazy numbers now, but earlier in the year he was super down. So I just don't feel confident about not playing a center in a 7-game series. It seems like it can be exposed so easily in a playoff series because you're going to see that same team so many times. If you're a half decent coach, you should be able to make use of that. Fair enough. Confirmed. Nick Harden hater. But next team that I have, funnily enough, is the Houston Rockets.
Wow.
So I'm 1 spot higher than Nick. It's not that there's that much of a difference.
Confirmed. Australia hates James Harden.
But likes them more than Poughkeepsie. Am I right?
Yeah.
But likes them more than Poughkeepsie does. I'm confident enough in what the Houston Rockets have. I think that the Robert Covington ad was a nice ad, and I think and I'm not as necessarily worried about the sort of the banging nature of a playoff sort of series and the physicality of it. I think PJ Tucker's made for that, and I think compared to like it's 7 games, like 27 games, there's going to be. I'm assuming there's probably going to be no regular season basketball, and if they're going straight into playoffs, I think PJ Tucker's going to be ready for that. And whatever team they come against, if it's let's go to the Clippers. He's going up against Montrezl Harrell and Ivica Zubac. I don't think that's necessarily the physicality that's going to really wear him down.
Don't sleep on Montrezl Harrell. Like his game's all about like toughness and banging. And I'm not really saying like 1 round, but I would assume at this point that we're at like the 8th team, we're assuming all these teams are in 2nd round.
Yeah, no, true. And I think in that sort of sense as well, against the Lakers, that's when the Houston Rockets, that's when all of this worked the best. That's when we saw 1 game, but all it takes is 4 of them when it comes to a playoff series. So, I mean, I think people will be a bit worried that Nick and I are arguing here. We are still friends. We are still going to be doing.
I'm scared. I might go.
Matt might replace me as a co-host on the Brooklyn Buzz. I don't know, but for now we're okay. And again, I'm only 1 spot higher on this team. I'm probably a bit more savage on him being so high on the Utah Jazz. But in that sort of sense, Houston Rockets, James Harden, I think he's primed to really prove himself. I think Russell Westbrook is and what he's doing for the Houston Rockets right now has proved that he's probably one of their best players. He's been the form player of the Houston Rockets, and I like Robert Covington. In terms of like the pieces around, I like D'Antoni. I like him a lot. Read into that what you will. But yeah, I think the Houston Rockets are right at this sort of range. I think they were probably the top of this sort of tier, if not the bottom of the next tier.
Boy, I am higher on the Rockets than you guys. I have kind of ending this tier. I don't know. It gets really. I don't even know what my tiers are at this point. They're very foggy at this point. I have the Nuggets.
Ooh,
that's fair.
I don't know. I just feel weird about the Nuggets. I feel like they largely kind of had the same season as last year. All the questions that I had about them haven't really been answered. And if anything, like the guys that I really trusted last year are a year older. Millsap is the one that comes to mind. Grant, I like. Yeah, he started slow and he really kind of found himself there. Monte Morris, maybe he pops a little bit better. He was really bad in last year's playoff series, but last year's playoffs against, I guess both really, but the Spurs especially. Yeah. But so I and then it comes down to Gary Harris, which I know Nolan's in here today in the chat. What up, Nolan? Gary Harris has not been good this year. And Jamal Murray, I have a couple of questions about. I just don't know what you're getting from him game to game. I mean, I'll give him credit. He was big in some games last year, and he kept them in. I mean, he stretched both those series. They both went 7, right, last year? So I think he was a big reason for that. But, yeah, I mean, I trust Jokic. I've seen everything I need to see from him. I think he'll be fine in the playoffs. But otherwise, I just, again, it's a team that didn't really answer any questions for me this year. I felt like we largely got the same year.
Do you think that Jokic is one of the players that will benefit least from the isolation in terms of, the habits? He's one of those players that probably has to play basketball to stay in shape and to have the sort of chefs around him to stop from eating, gummy bears and millions of liters of Pepsi.
Rumor is he walks around the arena with a bag of candy.
That was old rumors, Nick. That's old rumors. I will not take that salacious. Thick Lord Nikola Jokic.
I mean, let's be honest here. Jack, you just said it. Like, he needs to work on his diet. I'd be concerned if I was a Denver fan. Like, we saw what it took him to get in shape during this actual season. Like, the first month, he wasn't the same guy. And then all of a sudden, he started playing basketball, and he looked a lot better. So that's my next team is Denver. And like Matt said, you had a lot of questions and you're like, okay, they can answer these questions this regular season. Jamal Murray can get better. Gary Harris can kind of stay healthy and these guys can take a jump. And maybe Michael Porter can get good minutes, but we haven't really seen any of that. Jamal Murray's been super inconsistent. Gary Harris kind of continues to decline, I would say. And Mike Malone didn't feel like investing enough time in Michael Porter for him to have an impact in the playoffs.
Yeah, he feels like a guy that can just, a random home game where he just gets hot. And I don't know. Smooth. Yeah, he is. He's very smooth. He's the right type of guy, I think, for a playoff series, especially like just a young player where you just sort of you feel like you're going to get something from him. It's not going to be every single night, but I just don't know if they invested enough time into him. So I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that's a good point. And he gets forgotten about a lot. So
yeah. Actually, next NBA outlet that drops, Corey and I just talked about him for a little bit and like how annoying it is that they didn't invest in him because the ceiling of their team gets so much higher if he's a part of that rotation. And he's, obviously he has to make the jump defensively and learn basketball IQ type things, but still like that potential would be enough for me to be like, hey, I'm giving you minutes even if it costs us a couple games.
Right. Yeah, they're in a tricky spot because it feels like they're in a title run right now because of how well they're playing, but I actually could see, depending upon how you maneuver, that their run might happen in like a year or two, and I think there is some risk to shooting for it a little too early.
Yeah.
So I think that they're in a tricky spot with that.
Nick and I are friends again. I also have the Denver Nuggets at this spot. I've literally changed it on the spot as well. I've changed twice my team here. So I put I think the Rockets a little bit higher and the Heat a little bit lower. But I have, for the reason that you guys sort of outlined, I think if Michael Porter was 2 years older and, had that experience behind him, and if he was the second best player in the Denver Nuggets, I would be much more confident than having Jamal Murray as the second best player. Again, I'm probably more confident in Jamal Murray in a playoff series, weirdly, than in the regular season. I just think that he performs when he wants to, at least at this stage of his career. I don't think he's necessarily worth that max contract. But, in terms of a lot of pieces, Nikola Jokic obviously is probably, if we're factoring into account that they're going to be going to Orlando or Las Vegas and what shape is Nikola Jokic going to be, you could have this team maybe a spot lower than Houston or the Jazz or wherever teams that we sort of got. You could certainly make an argument for that. But I think that Mike Malone has coached well enough. I think that they have really good defense. I'm a big fan of Paul Millsap, another sort of Nets Twitter fan, Nets Twitter alumni fan. So Michael Porter, I think that just speaking holistically about the Denver Nuggets, in terms of their championship sort of window. I agree they are in that, but if Michael Porter becomes, because for me, I think you need a superstar wing to be the be-all and end-all sort of be, or you need to have incredibly elite guard play, or you need to have Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid or something like that. So if Michael Porter turns into a top 10 wing or a top 30 player, then I think the Denver Nuggets are really a bona fide championship contender. Jamal Murray, to me, works best as a sort of 2B, number 3 option, sort of flamethrower sort of guy. And I think Michael Porter can get better. I think that his ceiling is absolutely tremendous. And I think that the other team's loss in terms of the draft is certainly the Denver Nuggets game. I think they've handled him well enough, but I agree with what both of you were saying. I think that they could have got a few more runs into him, similar to what the Nets have done with some of their young guys. More minutes for Koritz, more minutes for Claxton, more minutes for Musa. That would have been smarter. It would have just made more sense. It probably makes less sense for the Denver Nuggets because they're trying to solidify some sort of home seeding, whereas for the Nets, it makes a lot more sense to be playing those young guys. But I digress.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there is some it's really great when a team overachieves right away, but I think there is a little bit lost in some areas, especially if you they're just in a really unique scenario where they have young guys that they hit on and you're not even sure if you can play them in a lot of ways. Like Beasley just wasn't getting burned for them. I think Beasley's pretty good. I liked Beasley. Yeah. I thought he was interesting.
They probably regret it now, looking at it.
It's because, that's just the problem. Like they competed right away and you feel the threat of hey, we need to get some vets and try to bring guys in to stabilize things out. And it's like, well, you just lost Beasley for pretty much nothing. And I liked him. I thought he had good energy in the playoffs last year, which you can mean nothing. But I don't know. I think that there is a little bit of ground loss with that. I am picking at number 7 this lovely logo that has never existed before. This pool logo. I don't know what this is, but it's very aquatic. It makes me want to go outside, which is probably not the best thing right now. I got the Sixers, man. They had a really hellacious season in a lot of ways. I was looking at some of the stuff. I'm like, so here's what has to happen. You need to get a lot of production out of Korkmaz and a lot out of Shake Milton, I think, to keep the 3-point shooting afloat. That worries me a little bit. Korkmaz had a really nice year. He shot 39% from 3. Really had some nice games, so I trust him a little bit. Milton was a nice little spark for them. They I'll say this about them. There was not the best press about them all year long, even when the season was kind of right as it, I guess, was put on suspension. There was this whole thing that came out from Jimmy Butler with JJ Redick talking about how it was just a mess over there. And they actually did a decent job finding some interesting young pieces that can contribute right away. I don't know what they're going to do. It just really comes down to go-to scoring at the end of games and 3-point shooting, which is why I wasn't super high on them at the beginning of the year. They really didn't give much burn to Glenn Robinson III or Alec Burks. I don't know why. I would have given those guys some time. Maybe they could be the next James Ennis, who was nice for them against the Nets last year. But yeah, weird year for them. I like them on defense. The offense is a huge question mark, and we learned pretty much nothing about that this year.
Yeah, this is probably the one team that we're pretty different on. I think Philly's team did not impress me during the regular season at all, but I never felt like they were going to be a good regular season team given the dynamics of being super huge. They're not my next team.
Right.
Next team is Boston. I think, these next couple teams you could switch up. They got potential to be higher, but I think literally 6, 5, and 4 would be spots I'm willing to change. I think the reason I have them this high, though, is because of the 4 scorers they have. They have Kemba, they have Tatum, they have Brown, and even Hayward, when healthy, has been pretty good this year. Daniel Theis has been solid. You got Brad Stevens coaching. So I could hear an argument for them to be higher, but this is where I have them in this tier right under the top.
Yeah, I've got the Sixers next as my sort of next spot. I think that the Celtics, I think what Tatum proved, I think is why I think that they are a better team in this year's playoffs than the Sixers will be. I think that they have a lot more questions around them. I still think that Joel Embiid is a better player right now, but what condition is he going to be in? What condition is Ben Simmons going to be in? We know he's healthy. I think Matt is a little bit lower on them because he wants them to blow up, so we can get one of those guys. I'm with him. Maybe I'll put them lower just for the sake of that. Not 100% sure, but there are – then they're coaching. Brett Brown isn't necessarily NBA Twitter's favorite coach. I know my guy Nick Busey, coach of JBT, is a bit of a bigger fan. That we're going to stick to our Oz brethren. But I still think, when you have Joel Embiid, that's I don't think that's my argument. I don't know if it's necessarily the strongest argument, but Joel Embiid is a stud. And when he can be the best player in any playoff series against any of the top 16 teams. I genuinely believe that. I think it is what Ben Simmons can be. We've seen it firsthand, in that sort of Nets series, how he really stepped up when Joel Embiid was out. But again, it's against the lowly Brooklyn Nets at that point. So I'm a little bit higher on the Sixers for that reason. I know our boy Billy said that we should have the Rockets a lot higher. He says Lakers, Clippers, Bucks, Rockets should be everybody's top 4. Billy, next time jump on, mate. You can make an argument. But in that sense, the imagination, the Sixers, because of Joel Embiid, I have to be a Ben Simmons believer. Got to stick to my country's allegiances. And Matisse Thybulle as well is going to be playing for Team Australia, the Boomers as well. A little bit of a fan of him. I think he can do some nice things in the playoffs as well.
I think Philly could put out easily the best defensive lineup out of any team in the postseason.
God, yeah.
They just have so many different options and so much versatility. Shake Milton really popped for them at the end. I mean, I like Philly, in my opinion, if I had my favorite to come out of the East would be Milwaukee. I might lean with Philly being that second team just because I think they have the highest ceiling out of all the other Eastern Conference teams because of the talent. I think we'd all agree. Maybe you could argue Boston, but I would say Philly's the second most talented team in the Eastern Conference. You got Joel Embiid, top 10 player. Some nights can play top 5. You got Ben Simmons, probably top 20, top 25 player. Then Tobias Harris is probably top 40. Al Horford's really dropped off. But having those two mega stars and Embiid and Simmons, obviously Simmons has to prove it in the postseason. But I would be intrigued by them. It's hard for me to have the Sixers so low just because I think they have such a high cap.
Let me see. I'm like flipping these back and forth over here. I'm stressed. I'm sweating. I don't know what I want to do.
I stayed true to my word. I haven't changed one pick since I went in. Maybe I'm being stubborn. I don't know.
God, I feel like I'm back in college and just not sure of my answers or anything.
It's an exam right now.
I'm gonna go Houston. I'm between these two teams. I'm gonna go Houston. Their ceiling is really high. I think Billy touched on this and did this well. I like their ceiling a lot. I think you've kind of talked me off the ledge with them a little bit, just in terms of being so high on what they could be. The baseline is really tricky. If it doesn't work with Tucker at the 5, then it gets a little bit tricky. And if Westbrook, who has not been good in the playoffs, he just has not been good, really in the last couple of seasons, if he doesn't perform, then I don't know who that number 2 guy is. Is it Eric Gordon, who really trailed off this year? That's a big question mark for me, but I mean, just the potential that you have of those guys, they could be in the mix. I actually think of anybody in the West right now, they are the team that's really in the mix the most of those top 3, more so than Denver, more so than Utah. And I could even see them taking down one of those top 2 if it really, really came to push and shove. But I just too many questions with them right now. And, I don't like that they never got Harden and Westbrook to be playing together well in the same sort of time span. It just never really happened for them. So that's a big problem, I think, that they needed to see before they got into the playoffs.
And I feel like there's a little concern just with the dependence on three-point shooting. We saw how that went for them a couple years ago. And Houston's a weird team. I feel like the floor is really low for Houston. Would I be surprised if they got knocked out in the first round? No. Would I be surprised if they got to the Western Conference Finals? Probably not. I just think there's so much unknown, and I'm just not willing to buy, I think, yet into the no center thing, or just the lack of bigs, because it's not even like they have a power forward they play low. PJ Tucker has done a great job. He's getting up there in age. You can only ask the guy to do so much if he's asking to defend multiple bigs throughout the postseason.
Yeah, it seems to me that it's all in for the Houston Rockets. If we're at a poker table, blackjack table, whatever it is, Maury's it could be his last season. Yeah, chips in. It could be D'Antoni's last season. Dylan Fertitta's running out of money. James Harden's going to get traded. Who knows? It could get absolutely. It could get crazy out here. And I think that this playoff series, if we do get one, could be the tipping point. No, I honestly do believe that. And whatever works or doesn't work, there is a chance that one of those 2 guard superstars get traded. I don't think it's blowing it up to trade Eric Gordon, or they've already traded Clint Capella out of the roster as well. So, yeah, there is a very fine line with this Houston Rockets team. You could have them as low as 11. You could make an argument that Dallas Mavericks are better than them in a series and could beat them in a series. but you could also have them, as high as Billy did, and as high as Matt did in terms of that sort of top 5 range, because you have James Harden. Like I think that we talk about individual players in all these series. James Harden is the best player is a top 4 player in the NBA right now. And yes, he hasn't proven in the postseason very often, but I think he's done better than we're probably a lot of people are giving him credit for. He just hasn't been LeBron James, Kawhi Leonard in that sort of stretch of the imagination, which I think the Rockets need him to be if they are to be a championship contender. They need him to take that next step, and I'm not 100% confident in that, which is why I had him a little bit lower. But I think he can do it because at the end of the day, he's one of the best shooting guards in the history of the game.
Yeah, I think the thing for Harden is we've seen him be good in literally the first half of the series. It's the second half he really starts to tail off. Maybe that's just workload or the defense adjusting. Just 2 more notes on Houston I felt interesting. I saw between Austin Rivers and Doc Rivers did one of those IG lives or streams or whatever they're doing. And Doc was saying how the Clippers sent, Pelotons, treadmills, weights, giving them home gyms. And Austin Rivers was like, yeah, we have voluntary yoga at 10 a.m. So it's they don't necessarily have the workload. And would you guys be concerned at all with James Harden possibly not being in shape in terms of postseason time? He's another guy that doesn't necessarily come to training camp with a great body.
Oh, yeah. Are you kidding me? I mean, he doesn't have any clubs to go to. That's the one thing I'll say.
Exactly.
No dancing.
So that's something to keep in mind. That's funny. That's actually a different podcast in itself, or the guys that you're most worried about in terms of coming into training camp in shape for these playoffs that are going to be pretty much impromptu. That's a pretty funny topic.
I feel right off the bat, you think Embiid, you think Jokic, and you think Harden. They're the guys that you were really oh, God, I'm not sure what's going to happen here.
They have a real all-NBA team here of guys that are not really in NBA shape. But no, that's really funny. Yes. Oh, sorry if I'm toying with the graphics so much. I'm sort of figuring this thing out on the go. Do we have anything else before I guess we get into our top 5?
No, I would just say my 6, 5, and 4 all I think were interchangeable. I think they all are pretty close to being there. At number 5, I have the Toronto Raptors. Obviously, last year's champions, got the depth, got the grittiness, like Jack kind of alluded to, some of the defensive stoppers they have. And I think Nick Nurse is a great coach in terms of making adjustments. Also, just the different pieces they'll throw at you on the bench too, because Nick Nurse is not a guy that's scared to play a 10-man rotation in the postseason. He's also not scared to play somebody in game 2 and then not play him the rest of the series.
Yeah, he's just a mental. He's a wizard, honestly. He really is. He's ridiculous.
He's the coach of the year.
Yes.
I had the Boston Celtics at number 5. I think that the closest rankings that I had was the Celtics and the Raptors. And I'll eventually, that's probably going to be on my next team. But I think that in a series, you could make an argument for me that either team is going to win it, and I think it would go 7 games, 100 times, 99 times out of 100, because they just have different strengths, but their strengths would outlie each other. It just depends on the day, who is going to, is Pascal Siakam, who's hot, who has the role players stepping up a little bit. Is Terrence Davis going to be dropping a couple of threes, Matt Thomas, or is it going to be Daniel Tice sort of playing some amazing defense out there? I think that the Boston Celtics have Jason Tatum's step up allowed me to sort of be more confident with them at this sort of range. And if you tell me that Kemba Walker is healthy, and I'm not 100% sure of that, I think Nets Twitter's been going wild, as has Celtics Twitter over Kemba versus Kyrie. Don't need to get into that because, this is a playoff power ranking podcast and video, mate, and chat. But for me, I think Jason Tatum is probably, out of all the guys that we've spoken about, a guy that's ready to really take a step. He's already proven it that he can make a mark in the playoffs. And he was a baby. Now he has the reps behind him. Now he's done it against the likes of Kawhi Leonard in the regular season. That is playoff level basketball, and he's stepping up in a big way. Jaylen Brown, I think, will be sensational on both ends of the floor. And Kemba Walker is literally your perfect 2B3 guy. Yeah, and I just am really confident about them. I think that they have a chance to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, probably as well as anyone, to be fair.
I agree. I'm gonna. It's really comes down to pretty much everything you just said. If I can get this graphic to sit in the right spot. So I have the Raptors. It really comes down to. And this is the one where I'm I could totally be wrong about this because I was looking at stats and stuff as I tend to do. They were first, I believe, in transition offense, second in half court offense. I mean, everything in my mind says I don't know if I really trust, like, who's going to be their go-to guy. What does it look like without a Kawhi? All these questions that they've so clearly answered this year a million times. And I'm still asking them because maybe I'm just ignorant. I don't know. But they have, as you said, so much rotational flexibility. There's just guys that they can play. There's guys, it feels like there's two good players at every single position. I like that about them. They have guys that can pop, that can win you games. Van Vliet could pop and win you 4 games. I don't know.
Just get his wife pregnant. Yeah. He'll be good.
Yeah, like they are a huge wild card. I think that they are the team that really will catch me by surprise more than really any other team. I kind of know what to expect from my top 4. These guys could, I did a podcast with one of my friends, and he had Toronto going to the finals. And I was like, you're crazy, but you're not that crazy, because they were really, really polished this year.
They're going to make anybody earn a playoff series win too. Like, it's not going to be easy against them, and they're coming off last year's experience. And also, like, this team probably knows there's a good chance this is their last run together.
Right.
Like, Serge is a free agent. Gasol's a free agent. Kyle Lowry's been in trade rumors, and they're obviously targeting, Giannis in 2021. So it's like, all right, this is like our last hurrah. Maybe we could go back to back. So Toronto's a really interesting team. And I think we haven't really discussed this aspect. And I think like this is a big part too, is like any team that has played well last year together or have a lot of similar parts going to this year will benefit, especially because of the hiatus. Like, there's going to be a gap and you're not going to get as much playing time. So the chemistry you built across last season could really benefit you in this current season, in this current postseason.
Yeah, totally right.
All right.
Nick, take it away. What
Next
do you got?
pick is going to be Philly, obviously here. I told you, 6, 5, and 4 could be interchangeable. I just feel like Embiid is just a guy that I feel like could be super dominant in a playoff series that could just be so impactful and really like screw things up for no matter what you're trying to do. Toronto did a great job last year taking him out of the series, but a lot will be on Brett Brown and also Embiid reacting to that. We saw how upset he was last season when they lost to Toronto on that shot. I think that's something that'll motivate him. And Embiid just, strikes me as a guy that wants to be great. He wants to hit that greatness level, and he understands like to get there, he needs to do these things in the postseason. Like I mentioned too, defensively, I feel like their team is just giant and they can just lock people down. And like going to a 7-game series where it's slowed down possessions in your half court, it's immensely tough to score on them inside. And just like they have other guys that can chase around the perimeter too, like a Richardson, a Simmons, just like they're a tough matchup in the postseason. Regular season, I wouldn't have them as high, but going to the postseason when you just need to win 4 games, it's hard to bet against 2 top 20 players, 2 top 25 players. And especially when one of them on any given night really can be, one of the best players in basketball in Joel Embiid.
Yeah, and I think this time off would certainly help a guy like Al Horford as well.
And Ben Simmons with a back injury.
And Ben Simmons has said that he's healthy too.
Would you play Al Horford or would you bring him off the bench? Like at the 5 or the 4? Excuse me. There we go.
I think it would depend on the matchup, but I would probably bring him off the bench depending on who like we're going against. But I think, there's so many options with that team. And I think, obviously I'm putting a lot of faith in Shake Milton, but his emergence at the end of the season, I think strike me as a guy that could have an impact because like he might not be the most talented guy, but you're not asked to do a ton because the attention is going to be on Embiid, Harris, Simmons, and you have all these big bodies to kind of run around and create space with. So like the guards don't have to be great. They just have to be pretty good, and they're going to end up looking better because of the talent around them.
Do you worry about the spacing at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm a huge spacing guy, so that would be like a concern. But I think like during the postseason too, like spacing isn't great regardless. Like teams are rotating a lot harder. Everything's a lot more tenacious. Like we mentioned with Duncan Robinson and what happened to Joe Harris, it's like the little bit of spacing might not be there in the postseason. I'd rather have a guy who's going to probably be a problem for most every team in the NBA down low because Embiid's just going to be a guy that's going to dominate the boards. You can get him touches. It's just going to have the only team that really I think in the East where you're like, all right, they can deal with Embiid pretty well is probably like Toronto. Milwaukee could probably do a good job too, but Embiid has had good games against Milwaukee. And I think like with the Bucks, we'll get to them a little bit later. There's other concerns.
I've got at this next spot the Toronto Raptors. I think 4, 5, 6 is the East Elite. Yeah, obviously the 76ers couldn't put it together in the regular season. I think Nick touched on a point in the fact that the Toronto Raptors match up quite nicely with the Sixers. I think obviously another year of Marc Gasol isn't necessarily the greatest thing in the world, but he, to an extent, shut down or at least nullified the strengths of Joel Embiid in a big way and was a key reason, other than Kawhi Leonard just being Kawhi Leonard, that they won that series. Yeah, exactly. And I think Nick Nurse is the best coach in the NBA right now, and I think would make adjustments. If they were to be going down by like 10 early on, he would throw the whole schemes out the window and go, all right, let's just do some zone for 3 minutes. Let's do box and one. And I think that has value. I think that has real value. I think he did it in the finals against the Golden State Warriors a few times as well. I think that the reason why I trust the Raptors a little bit more is partly because of team chemistry, partly because Serge Ibaka is a very sexy man, and I love his scarves, very good scarf game. I will give him the respect where respect is due. I think Kyle Lowry has proven himself to be a really good player performer now. I think Pascal Siakam can really shine, and I just think the pieces around him. I think that they have the best team out of these 3 teams that we've sort of been discussing out of the East Elite.
Yeah, again, like that depth of that team is crazy, and it's funny that we didn't see it last year, kind of, in the rumblings of it. But now that, you're looking back at it now, you're like, God, they just have like so much, and they've uncovered pieces. Terrence Davis, Boucher. There we go. Dude, I'm so bad
Jack's
with
a
pronunciation.
specialist, so you need any
please
word pronunciation, you got Jack right here. He helps for you every week.
I'm probably gonna message you at least 4 times a day with stuff like this because I'm notoriously bad at it.
And your voice messages.
Really. I have at number 4, I have Boston. I can go 2 ways with them. So I like their first 6 guys. You got Gordon Hayward, Brown, Tatum, Walker, Smart, Tice. That's a nice 6. Tatum especially hit all the check marks that we mentioned. I believe he had 12 30-point games in his last 15, so he was like breaking out.
Against good teams too.
Yes. The issue, and it may not matter in the playoffs, but is the bench. It's I don't think Brad Wanamaker should see the floor. Ojale, even you're like, I don't know what you're getting. Grant Williams, I don't know. It's just a lot of guys where you really don't feel like you can play them more than maybe 15 minutes, maybe 13.
You probably don't even want to play him 10.
You
might not have to though. You might not have to.
Right. And I mean, if you can get away with it for the first round and play some guys that maybe not great and you sort of get away with a matchup that's more favorable for you, and then you can start really shortening those rotations to like 6-7 players, then maybe that works. But that's my only concern with them. I like everything else. I like that they're interchangeable. I love teams that are switchable. I'm a sucker for that. So they're really interesting in that way. And the biggest, it's weird, like the guy that's the most polished and the all-star of their 5 guys. I mean, maybe you could say Smart because he gets a little trigger happy, but Walker is my guy where I'm like, I don't know like what he looks like. Is there depending upon who they're playing, is he going to get clamped up? Is he going to have trouble creating for himself just because he's a little bit smaller? And we've seen that in instances against good teams. That would be my biggest concern, but they don't really have that many questions for me that aren't, I would say like marginal. So
yeah, I think if he's healthy, that's like probably the biggest concern. Yes. When he came back, he didn't look fully himself.
Right.
I would say other for Boston too is like if you get Daniel Theis into foul trouble, like where are they going? Like are they going to Robert Williams, and that's a little scary because his lack of experience. Yeah. Or you're going with Dennis Kanter, who can't really play a lick of defense, and you're just kind of getting rebounding and shooting. I think that'd probably be my biggest concern with Boston, where like there might not be a good second big on that roster, at least this season. I think by next year, those guys will be developed. But at this point, that's like a concern for me, especially if they got matched up against Embiid.
Yeah, and like I think Kanter, the way to do it would be to like hide him and drop, and I don't know how much Stevens would do.
And even that, like he's bad in drop. Like I mean, we both rewatched the Karis LeVert 51-point game. Every time he saw Enes Kanter, it was a bucket. Like,
yeah, it's pretty troubling. But I mean, you just sort of hope that he puts up enough offensively and go with that.
Hopefully you only got to play him 10 minutes.
It's different though, because he's not on Portland anymore. So he's not going to be getting the touches that he was getting there, because they were just kind of like a team that was sort of, grabbing for scraps in a lot of ways. Even like they played so much through Rodney Hood last year and stuff like that. They won't really have that in Boston. It's not like you're going to get all the touches you want, Enes Kanter. So then it's like, I don't know what you are on the floor. Are you a net positive?
Or do I just play Robert Williams and take the risk?
That might be what I would do, and just hope the verticality works out well, and just being a roller, and just go with that. But
he's got some pop too. Like he'll throw down some nice dunks. I think like the thing with him is just a lot of IQ. Another guy like going back to that 51-point game, just consistently like out of position.
Yeah. I mean, he was unpolished coming in, and he's still looking like that. So, but What are we at? We are
we're at number 3. We're top 3 now.
Wow, there we are.
So the top 3 was actually really hard picking the order. I think I went like complete opposite.
I don't think it was that hard for me, to be honest.
It was pretty easy.
Well, yeah. I mean, like, preface with a question that Matt initially asked, like, it was like, which team would you not want to face in the postseason?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that's where it was like, oh, LeBron and AD. Like, I would not want to see LeBron in the playoff series. But then looking at the rest of the roster, I had to go with the Lakers here, just because I don't think they have enough of a complete team.
Did the Lakers third?
Yeah, I had the Lakers third.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I had the Lakers third. I mean, they were actually my pick to win a championship. But if I'm doing like a fair objective ranking here, they have the top 2 talent, and then you just look at the rest of the team, and I think there's just like a ton of question marks. Like, after LeBron, there's a lack of creation on this team. And like, even just in comparison to the other teams, like the third best player on the Lakers has been a discussion we've had at multiple points of the year, where I just feel like I'm not sure if I'm fully confident in, them being it. But like I mentioned, I literally switched it because I had the Lakers first, and I was like, LeBron in the playoff series, potentially his last chance at a chip. He could be number 1. So I think like all these teams are separated by inches.
Is it KCP? Is that their third best player?
That's like my co-host on the outlet. That's been his pick. He said KCP's probably been the third best player. A lot of people say Danny Green, but it hasn't necessarily been Danny Green's best season. So it's like
he's been that good.
Yeah. So it's. I think I just like am concerned. Obviously, LeBron is LeBron, but like, it's just a lot to ask him to do it again at 35, carry a team, and just have a lack of creation other than himself. AD is an amazing player. Don't get me wrong. I'm super high in AD. I think he's probably been underrated this whole season.
Mm-hmm.
It's just more so of like, 2 players could be enough to win a championship, but 2 players are enough where it's not that hard for a coach to eliminate 2 guys.
Right. All right.
My number 3 is the Milwaukee Bucks. The reason why is because of my top 2 teams. I don't think that they have guys that they don't have the 2 best player performers in the NBA. It's as simple as that. Giannis is going to be the MVP. Chris Middleton has had a stupid season. It is dumb about how efficient he has been. Like 50, 40, 90 on the usage and the production that he's had in a lot of games that Giannis has been out. It is insane. He should be an all NBA player, and if he isn't, then something is wrong. And maybe we see Eric Bledsoe actually play a good game in the NBA playoffs. I'm not going to count on it because I haven't seen it yet for the past 2 or 3 seasons. Whereas, the other 2 teams that are remaining, I think that, yes, there are a lot more questions beyond their superstars. And the collective of Milwaukee is probably as good as the Clippers, if not, well, definitely better than the Lakers. I just think that doesn't matter when it comes to when you're talking about scary teams and the best teams in the playoffs. To me, what scares me is the best player. You're Michael Jordan, a Kawhi Leonard, LeBron James, a Kobe Bryant. Giannis isn't that player yet. He doesn't necessarily scare me. I think that if he has a chance and he can, I've said this, I'd probably the most extensive argument.
Manuell hate Giannis Antetokounmpo. That is a real tweet because
I agree it.
we had an NBA outlet episode, and Jack said that Giannis is not a guy that you can completely build around. He's not in the same tier as a LeBron James and a Kawhi Leonard. So
second star Giannis.
Yeah. I'm sorry to cut you off, man. I know you got next pick, but I like good. It's like Giannis. Like, I think we just keep saying like, oh, he's not that guy. Giannis. Do it last year. But like, this guy is really, really good. He could really be the best player in the NBA. I don't think if we had the postseason and the Bucks won, and like, or even if the Bucks didn't win, we could walk away still saying Giannis is the best player in the NBA because of his 2-way ability. And obviously, a lot of it's on Coach Bud. But if Coach Bud doesn't make an adjustment this year for the offenses that he saw, the defenses he saw against Giannis, that's on him. And that's like on his coaching resume that he's just not a good playoff coach. And I think that hurts him in terms of like his career resume. So if he's not able to make the adjustment, especially considering I think they even have more spacing this year. George Hill's even playing better. Chris Middleton's doing well. They tried to like play too many guys last year. I think if he cut down the rotation a little bit, I have some more confidence in the Bucks this year than I did last season. And also, like I mentioned earlier, like you're talking about a team that has a ton of chemistry, probably more chemistry than maybe any other team in the league. And we just didn't play for 2 months or 3 months or whatever it is at the time. That's going to benefit them.
You're good at this. I'm rethinking everything.
With the reason again with the Bucks is Giannis could be the best player in the NBA, but that's the key word, could. LeBron and Kawhi have done it for years and years on end, and until Giannis does it for me, I'm not trusting him yet. And call me a Giannis hater. I think there are less Giannis stands than James Harden and LeBron stands. So I'll firmly stay in the Giannis lane. I'll let the Greek freaks and the internationals come at me. But I think that, yes, Giannis has a really big opportunity. Will Mike Budenholzer play more than 31 minutes in a playoff game? Hopefully. Hopefully. So I think that I'm probably going to be eating my words very, very soon, and I'll happily do it. I've been wrong on more than one occasion on plenty of podcasts and in plenty of articles, but until I am proven wrong, I'm going to back the guys that have proven to me time and time again that they can get it done and they can win the chip. And I think that it's, for me, the top two are in a realm of their own, and then the Bucks are in the realm of their own, and then there's that next realm with the Raptors and the Celtics and the such. But it's Kawhi and LeBron. I'm not betting against them. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I'm going to... Well, first off, just to respond to one thing from chat, I am not going to sing Backstreet Boys. I am going to sing my third praises here to the Milwaukee Bucks. Great points by both of you. You know what, man? Let me see. Did I put everything in here correctly? Yeah, I did. I really am stuck between the Lakers and the Bucks, which is, I guess, a giveaway to my number one. Sorry to do that. But that's.
I think we're all going to have the same number one.
All right, so that makes me feel a little better.
We're not.
You're going to have the Lakers,
really?
Right?
Oh wow! A sneak preview. It's a great question of depth versus star power between those two. And I'm just thinking about what I'm going to pick, because this is probably the three teams that are most likely to go to the finals. I guess the Bucks have a little bit better of a chance than the two that are going to go against each other. But I just don't know who closes out games for the Bucks. And I don't know why this is my big thing that I think I definitely overrate. It's like why I'm probably admittedly too high on Butler and guys like that. And then for a guy like Giannis, I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. What is your go-to move if the score is close as it tends to be in the playoffs? Unless they're just blowing everybody out by 30. Like maybe, with the Bucks, maybe they are just this unbelievable, team that's got this point differential of like plus 12, and they're just that much better than the rest of the league. I don't know. But right now, I'm just thinking about this as, hey, is this going to be a close game or series? And what does that look like? And I'm just worried that those touches are going to go to Middleton, who, by the way, I've been this like giant Middleton stan now. That's like what my persona is on Twitter now. But I'm a little skeptical of what that may look like.
I think that's why I think so much pressure is on Coach Bud. Like, you need to put Giannis in a position for him to be successful. There's ways to run plays to get him posts in the mid touch or the low post. Like, he's a mismatch on most guys. Like, yep. I'm pretty much every guy in the NBA. There's like very few that can actually deal with him. Like in the low post, if Giannis has the height, or the size, he can just back them down. If it's a bigger guy, he has the quickness to get past him. We know how fast his first step off the ground is. He can throw you on a poster. Obviously, The supporting cast is going to be huge, but I feel like the chemistry and doing it another year should benefit them. And like, they're just a really good team. Like, I just have a confidence in their team aspect. Like I said, I could easily put the Lakers at the number 2 spot, but I went with the Bucks here at number 2.
What do they look like if Bledsoe and Lopez Lopez was decent last year. I don't want to
Lopez had a big game. I think Brooks' shooting wasn't necessarily great, but I think
it hasn't been good this season either.
No. He's taken a step defensively this year.
Oh yeah, big time.
So he's also got like the sickest post game, just sitting there. Just pull it out whenever he wants, which is like my favorite thing.
It used to be really good back in the day in Brooklyn and New Jersey. We got to see a lot of it, but now he's just more show like that complimentary piece. I think honestly, a lot of it's on Coach Bud. Like, I'll keep getting back to that. The talent is there to be the best team in the East and pretty much easily get to the finals. But if you get out-coached on numerous occasions like happened last year, you're not going to get there. So I have confidence in the talent. Maybe I don't have as much confidence in Coach Bud.
Yeah, he's weird. He's tough to get a read on because he's one of those guys that gets the most out of his players, like especially those like, maybe like 4 through 10 spots.
Yeah.
But then when it comes to like adjusting game to game, he's inflexible in a way. So it's like really hard, I think, to get a read of. Yeah, it's and I think that's probably just what happens when you're that good in the regular season.
Yeah.
You're just, after year after year after year, you're just turning out these 60-win teams. It's almost like, why would I change? This worked in the regular season for, 60 of 82 games. Like, I'm not going to do that. And I think maybe that works against him almost.
And I feel like you need to have willingness to bench Eric Bledsoe. If Bledsoe's like not having a good game offensively and it's killing your spacing, you have DiVincenzo, you have George Hill. Both guys, solid defenders, have the three ball. I just think it fits better sometimes the offense in the playoffs. And then maybe you stagger Bledsoe's minutes so he's running the bench unit a little bit or something. But obviously Bledsoe and Middleton will need to step up. Middleton, we've seen him have big playoff series. Last year in the postseason wasn't great for him, but the year before, he actually, I think, had a better postseason than Giannis.
Yeah, he was way better than Giannis.
Yeah, and he hit that crazy shot against the Celtics at like half court to win the game. So if Middleton can get back to more of a consistent level, like I just have confidence in this Bucks team. But again, it's LeBron James, so what am I to say?
Yeah,
he is 35 though.
Yeah, if you put Nick Nurse on the Milwaukee Bucks, I would obviously have a harder time with this top three because, I think we've made the point of Mike Budenholzer. Kenny Atkinson, I think the highest ceiling of him right now is what Mike Budenholzer is. He's been in Atlanta. But I think that you need to be flexible as a coach. You need to be flexible as a player. You need to know what's not working. And last season, Mike Budenholzer was out coaching a lot of series, and it was essentially the talent of Giannis that got them by in a lot of ways. So if you put Nick Nurse, the best or one of the best coaches in the NBA on, or you put Doc Rivers or whoever on,
put Eric Spoelstra,
put Eric Spoelstra, put Rick Carlisle, put any of the elite tier because I don't necessarily put Snyder. I don't necessarily put.
I even think Brad Stevens would be better because he's willing to make adjustments.
Yeah, Brad Stevens, absolutely. I think all those guys have been mentioned are an elite tier of coaches. I think Mike Budenholzer is in that because of what he does in the regular season. But if we're talking about X's and O's, yes, he has created a sensational scheme that fits his superstar incredibly well, and he's gotten the best out of guys. The growth of Dante DiVincenzo, all these other guys that are on the roster. Revolutionizing Brook Lopez, turning him into a defensive stud. Even though we've always known he's had a little bit of defensive acumen in him. For me, coaching matters probably more in the playoffs than it does at any other point, and that's not necessarily a totally salient point. But, that's where I think you can lose a series. And I think that's why, or at least even games, when when you're down, 2-1 and you go down 3-1, if you're refusing to make any adjustments, you lose the series because of that inflexibility.
Game 3 is, I think, where the adjustments really happen. Game 1 and 2, you're just like, hey, all right, we're learning sets. We're getting a feel for each other. Now someone's going to make a big adjustment. How do you react to that adjustment? It's not going to be right off the bat because they could come out with a different starting lineup or even in second quarter. But at halftime, that's when you need to make the change. And not to get to the Nets, but I think that was some of the concern with Kenny Atkinson we saw at times was the lack of adjustments, especially last year when Brett Brown started to change things up. Kenny really didn't do anything different. And even when we saw Karis LeVert pop in game 1 and game 2 and in game 3, it took him all the way to game 4 to play him starting level minutes. So it's just like you need to adjust. You need to be quick. And you need to be able to just throw out what you did in the regular season.
Yeah, I think adjustments, that's weirdly enough been Ty Lue's big candidacy right now. Is it his ability to adjust? It's kind of what separates, I think, a regular season coach and a playoff coach. And I feel like I'm kind of snubbing Atkinson and I guess Bud, although Bud could easily change my mind this year. But, I think that it's arguably the most important thing you can do in the playoffs as a coach is be able to be like, hey, here's the thing. So you're playing a team for up to 7 games and ultimately it becomes a battle of I'm going to change a couple of things and then they're going to change a couple of things. You need to be changing stuff throughout. You can't be doing the same thing over and over and over because they're seeing you every 2 or 3 days. They know what you're going to do after a while. So you need to be flexible.
Especially if you go up 2-0. You think my team is we're so confident we're going to kill them. They make a big adjustment in game 3. You don't match that. Now the series has a whole different dynamic. So I agree. Coaching is huge.
Yes. And I think that's where coaches do get underrated is when you have those adjustments, because that's the stuff that players, as great as they may be, they're not going to really affect. They're not controlling who they're going to be playing with and where they're going to be playing and how many minutes they're going to be getting. That stuff is kind of out of their control, and you need the right guy leading that. Are we ready to do number 2?
Yes. So I have the Bucks at number 2. And no I don't need to talk about them any longer. So.
We'll be quick.
This is where I think the chatter is going to start because I have the Clippers at number 2.
Wow.
I'm going to be the LeBron James stan. I'm going to stand for him and Anthony Davis. I think that LeBron is still the guy. I can't necessarily make any analytical points other than I think that a rejuvenated LeBron and Nick has spoken about the age factor. I think that he realizes this probably more than any other player in the NBA. And I think that if there is the desire to win the 2020 championship, I think is higher for him than any other player. And I think LeBron with a desire and a focus is something to behold. We saw what he did against the best regular season team in the history of the game. Probably the most momentous playoff series win and championship win in the history of this great game. I think that LeBron is going to take it to another level. I think he's been the second best player in the NBA this season. I think in series, and we've seen, the Clippers and the Lakers go back and forth in their games at Staples Center. I don't think there's that much separating them game to game. I think overall, I agree. I think the Clippers are a far deeper team. I think Lou Williams actually can be exposed a little bit. I think Montrezl Harrell can be exposed a bit. And I think that you have Davis and LeBron. I think Davis and LeBron, for me, are better than George and Kawhi. I think Paul George has had some lingering issues. Obviously, I don't necessarily judge him on last year's OKC series because of that shoulder injury. But, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, when they've been together, they've been insane. So I think you're splitting hairs a little bit. But for me, it's just purely the LeBron factor in the fact that I think that he's going to want it more. I think Kawhi probably has an insatiable desire to win as well and is the second best player performing here. But I think LeBron, until he proves it to me otherwise, is the guy. And I'll probably be eating my words here and be too much of a Lakers stan and too much of a LeBron stan. But I just think that in a 7-game series, when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, I think LeBron is going to want it more. And I think from minute-to-minute basis, 48 minutes, he's going to be playing 46 of them. Despite the fact that he's 35 years old, I think that he has spoken about his conditioning has been a little bit trickier during this quarantine. But we know that he's got all the hyperbaric chambers and Dragon Ball Z probably shit behind the scenes. He's probably got some sensu beans as well behind the scenes as well. I'm
sounds like cheating, Jack. I don't know. He might have HGH.
Yeah. Sensu beans are not on the prohibited list. Under the maybe that's what DeAndre Ayton took and Wilson Chandler took. I'm not 100% sure. But for me, it's LeBron. That's my argument.
It's funny is because I had the same list as Jack, like in terms of the top 3 when I just initially made my thoughts. And then when I just dove into it deeper, I just couldn't convince myself. But it's
don't dive deeper, Nick. Come on, man. We're not about going deep into this. Go off crazy. Let's get crazy and wild with it. We're not supposed to be looking up stats and stuff. We have Kevin Durant on our team. Who brings analytics to a basketball conversation? We need to be scanning our brethren and our God. Please, come on, Nick. Come on.
I mean, part of it was the LeBron factor, though. It's just at what point do you stop betting again, believing in LeBron or betting against him or whatever it might be? It's just so hard to say. And it's just I don't know. Maybe I have more confidence Kawhi, or maybe I just have more confidence in the fact that I think the Clippers can throw out more looks and they can make more adjustments and they can make life more difficult for LeBron with all the different bodies they can throw at him. I think for the Lakers, we keep talking about LeBron, but if AD is that top 5, top 3 player, I think a lot of us believe he could be, then yeah, the Lakers are better. But it's just AD probably has to be better than LeBron in my eyes.
Right.
Because I think teams are going to focus to take LeBron.
That's a hot take.
I think because I think there's just going to be more attention towards LeBron. It's everybody knows if you're going to beat the Cavs the last couple of years or whoever Miami, it was always about stopping LeBron or making his life difficult. And the Clippers just have an array of bodies that they can throw at LeBron. Nobody's going to stop him, but they're going to be able to slow him down. Kawhi's had success. Paul George has done okay against him.
Easy for Beverly. Just easy for Beverly.
Yeah, Pat Bev, obviously, just the best one out there. No, but then you got Marcus Morris, just different bodies you can throw at him to make his life more difficult and fatigue him a little bit more. And I don't think LeBron's the same guy we saw in 2016. I still think he's one of the best players in the league, but I think there is a little bit of a decline. Maybe his basketball IQ is picked up to make up for some of that, but I think from an athletic standpoint, you can't expect someone to be the same player they were at 31 that they are at 35 in terms of their body, right? Especially with the mileage this guy's put on.
Well, we made Nolan happy with our picking of the Bucks, so we made one person happy today. I'm very proud of us. Let me just say,
I lost about 25 followers already.
Yes, slandering for LeBron. I'm gonna go Lakers at the 2 right here. I'm going to actually disagree with you on the LeBron thing. I think he's obviously a different player. I'm not sure what it looks like at the rim for him, but he's made himself such a prominent and just felt post player now. He's better than he's ever been from the post. If you watch him, I was very lucky to go see them play the Nets. Not a great game, but was lucky to go see them this year.
It's a good first half.
Yeah, it was exciting. It was cool. I was with my family, so it was a nice sentimental little experience with them. His knowledge of the angles, I feel like, and the way he finds guys. I mean, it should be a testament of how well some of these guys are playing with him this year. He is just able to find guys better than he's ever really been able to do before. I mean, you could look at the straight up assists and be like, oh, they're up, but it's more than that. It's like he is fully in control of everything that happens in either transition or the half court. Their closing lineup, I'm just like, does Kuz play? Is he a part of that at all? I'm assuming Howard and JaVale will be kind of phased out almost altogether. I don't know which one of those guys I even trust a little bit more, but I'd assume you want to run AD at the 5. Then it's LeBron, and then what is it? KCP, Bradley, Green? Is that what it
looks
like?
It's also like, who do you feel confident with the kickouts? Like, who's the guy you feel confident with the threes? Like, Danny Green has a championship experience, but we saw last year, Danny Green's either 0-7 or he's like 3-5.
And he's been that way his whole career. Like, even on the Spurs, it was like, oh boy, all right, well, I guess Danny Green's going to either set the record or he's going to be like unplayable. It's like, I don't know what you do. He belongs
on the Rockets. Like,
yeah, and KCP is just that, like, but exponential. He'll just have full seasons where he's not effective. And then Bradley, I mean, is fine. He's a good cutter. Defends hard. I think that he had a nice little return to prominence this year, but after that it starts to get a little dicey. Is Caruso going to play, or are they going to stick with like Rondo because of pedigree alone? And I don't know. There's questions about them. LeBron is so good. Anthony Davis, I feel like I kind of honestly underrate in a lot of ways. I love what he does defensively. He's not flashy at all to watch on offense, and I think sometimes it's very easy to gloss over him in that way. But no, I mean, they're that top
two. It's a little
2.
mid-range jumper happy, like for AD, like a little bit too much of the spot-up jumpers and like the post. It's like, yo, you are so much quicker than him. Like, we watched the Nets-Lakers game, obviously, like a couple of weeks ago. And like, yo, you had DeAndre on you and you're settling for jumpers. You could take him first step easy.
Yeah.
Like,
drives me crazy. And then he'll end up with like 27 and 12. And you're like, all right, well, I guess I don't know anything. My eye test is broken. So, it's a tricky thing, but those top 2 guys are better than really any other team's top 2. And that is
it's not really close, to be honest.
It's not. It's really not.
The only team in the league would really whatever you want to put AD, the lowest you could put him is 7. So it's 2 top 7 guys.
For sure.
Like, and you could argue 2 top 5, 2 top 4, whatever you want to say.
I would even say if Brooklyn's guys are healthy, I think they might be number 2. I would actually just Durant off of a kid. Let's pretend Durant's 100% because that's more fun. Then it becomes a discussion of George and Kyrie. I actually kind of like Kyrie a little more in the playoffs, to be honest with you.
At least postseason, what we've seen so far, Kyrie's got a lot better resume, including that big ass shot in the finals. Like,
yep. So I mean, that just kind of tells you how far ahead I think the Lakers are. But it's not only about 2 guys. It's that other questions. If they had like 4 really solid guys that I believed in game to game to game, I would unquestionably take them number 1. And I know they played well. They had guys show up. KCP was, a real contributor. Kuzma actually kind of looked like he was figuring out near the end of the year, but you just never know. He's a little bit of a question mark for me. And then again, it's just like I just need a little more in terms of than just 2 guys. So
I just like the versatility a little bit more with the Clippers. Like I said, my preseason pick was the Lakers because of the whole LeBron factor and possibly his last chance at a chip. But like looking at it objectively, I just think like there's so many dynamics where they can throw out the Lakers to switch things up. The Lakers don't really have many options where it's just like so LeBron and AD dependent, and we don't know who that 3rd or 4th guy is going to be. And then it's also like Frank Vogel has a pretty good coaching history, but I don't know if he's going to outcoach Doc Rivers.
Right. They, I remember doing this. I did a podcast similar to this a couple weeks ago. I believe they were like a top 3-4 team in transition. They were kind of middle tier half court offense, which is like a little bit like I'm just a little worried about that. That's like just something that it stood out to me in a way where I was like, I'm going to just file that away and think about that whenever we do get basketball back, because that's something I would keep an eye on.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, because your transition buckets are dropping probably to a quarter of what they were in the regular season.
Yes. Let's do number 1s. It seems like it's already there. So
big surprise here. I'm going to go with the Clippers.
Yep.
Obviously, we kind of went through all the reasons here. I think right now, like Kawhi showcased last year, he can carry a team. Paul George is a guy who's struggled sometimes in the postseason, but we've seen him have big games. And then, like I mentioned, just the different options they can throw at you that I think can make life super difficult, where they can go defense happy or they can go offense happy.
Yep,
I would be their center position.
Yeah, and I think Montrezl can be exposed a little bit. I personally had the Clippers. Funnily enough, it's almost the opposite of Nick. I had the Clippers as my preseason pick, whereas now I picked the Lakers. The reason I've already outlined, it's marginal between Clippers and Lakers, and I'm literally almost looking at their past matchups. I think that the Clippers have a better 7-8 man rotation, but the Lakers have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. That's basically it. And I go more on superstar talent and superstar pedigree when it comes to playoff basketball than it comes to depth. I think the coaching, I think you could certainly give a tip to Doc Rivers. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, I mean, we've probably outlined the reasons aplenty. I think that, for Nick to have the Lakers at 3 is probably the most surprising thing. But, I'm going to stop criticizing my co-host because, again, I need a job and the quarantine. I need to keep the Brooklyn Buzz a part of my financial history. But Lakers number 1 for me, but the Clippers, you could certainly make the argument for me because I had that argument in October.
I'm gonna stick with the preseason pick. Yeah, I was high on the Clippers. Weird year. They still were on pace to win 56 games. They had stars in and out of the lineup, which was kind of tough. I mentioned the half-court scoring. They were 8th in that. I really do. I think that's really important. Their half-court D was 5th. And I just look at their rotation. I know depth doesn't matter that much, but man, they just have so much flexibility with it. Zubac was pretty good around the rim, as a defender. I was looking at some of his numbers. Yeah, he's
a big dude.
Do I trust him against Anthony Davis? Probably not. If you have some sort of poo-poo platter of Morris and him and Trez Harrell just coming out being energetic and just trying to bother him, then yeah, I can see that. Those are all kind of pesty guys. And when you go farther down the line, it's Landry Shamet, I can kind of get into him. He was proved to me that he can at least compete defensively more than I thought he ever really would be able to. Spaces the floor. The top 2 guys. Morris can space it too. You get a little worried about him getting shot happy, kind of similar to a Marcus Smart. But this is just a really deep team, and I actually think that I could see these guys even in the finals. I know you're not supposed to do this, or it's not typical, but you could see them running a 7-8 man rotation, maybe 9 in game 1 with the home. Well, I guess
Golden State did it in 2015.
Yeah,
they still rode out with their regular rotations. 2016, they started to change things up a little bit, but it makes sense, especially if you're not playing guys big minutes and you're just switching it up from game to game. I think the real intrigue with the Clippers too is you're looking at 3 really good ISO scorers.
Yes.
Kawhi, obviously, at the top level. Then you got Lou Will. And then, we got Paul George, too, who can go get you a bucket. And I think it gets a problem where, can we match up with these 3 guys? And then, in just hypothetical Lakers matchup, you feel good with, Patrick Beverley guarding somebody and not having to play on-ball defense fully tight and kind of going down to bother AD in the post or just kind of bother LeBron. I just feel there's the attention that could be on AD and LeBron could be so big that it could make it tougher for them to win. But again, always hard to bet against the king.
We also didn't mention they probably have the 2 of the top 3 to 4 picks for guys you'd want to guard LeBron.
Yeah.
Honestly, even now, even after these guys have sustained injuries, done deep playoff runs, won titles, or one of them has won titles. I still, look, we saw what Kawhi did against Giannis last year. I
don't think anyone will forget the face LeBron made when he saw Kawhi come into the game.
That's 7 years ago, bro. Chill. Come on.
Even the rumors this season were hey, Kawhi was saying to his trainer that LeBron's scared to guard me and all this stuff. I think there's a little tension there.
Oh yeah.
But also, Kawhi didn't go to the Lakers. He could have easily went to LA, played with AD and LeBron, and won 3 or 4 championships. He said, "Nah, I want to do my own thing." And I feel that plays a little bit into it. And I think it's great for the NBA too.
Yeah, we need the playoffs to come back. That's the bottom line for this. And, in doing this exercise, I really want it to come back. I'm so excited for it. I'm itching for it. One thing I will say, Kawhi, look, there's last year, he won a championship banged up. This year, he looked good. The defense was another level up. He obviously, you're going to lose some with taking such a load on offense, but man, that guy really, it was closer to Spurs Kawhi in terms of defense than I think people would realize. So They're scary, man. All that stuff, like, I just don't even feel like we saw them at full form, especially on defense, because the offense solves itself. As you said, 3 guys that can go in repeatedly with the isolation possessions, but defensively, I mean, dude, good looking scoring on those guys. And they only got richer with Morris. He really could play some 5 for them.
And even if they had an injury, like, I don't even hate the Reggie Jackson addition as like your backup point guard. That's like a solid guy. And getting back to Kawhi, I think people forget in Game 7 against Philly last year, he took like 35 shots. Like, he at times was asked to really carry the load for Toronto. He has other good scorers in this team where it's just not as dependent, because Siakam was a little bit banged up in the postseason last year. So that just put a little bit more pressure on Kawhi.
And for Paul George, on the flip side of that, he's never had a guy as reliable as Kawhi. This is the perfect situation for him where he can sort of play through. I don't know. I mean,
pick his spots.
Yeah, essentially play through his warts a little bit. So that team, I can talk about them for days. I really can. I just think they're fascinating. I've loved them since they came together. They even got rid of a guy that I thought was going to play for them with Harkless. And that's crazy. Like, it's just incredible that they've been able to maintain this. Reggie Jackson, as you said, looked kind of good for them. I mean, it's just everybody looks good for them. I don't know if that's just a testament to Rivers or just how talented they are that guys are able to play comfortably. But, yeah, man, the Clippers are scary, and I just am going to pick them no matter what.
Yeah, and I'm going to knock on wood here because I don't want to, like, wish bad on anyone, but the probability of someone getting hurt in if a possible postseason is highly likely.
Yes.
Just because we're coming off a hiatus and guys aren't going to be in mint shape. So you have a little bit more confidence in teams that might have the depth, because one injury could be killer to certain rotations, where a team like the Bucks or the Clippers, I think they take that one injury hit, long as it's not Kawhi or long as it's not Giannis, they're feeling pretty okay with it. You know what I mean? They can plug another guy in.
Flip side of that, because we're playing probably on a neutral ground, that's actually going to really help them. You don't have thousands of Lakers fans in there screaming for LeBron when it's supposed to be a home game, or even the Bucks. Like, I mean, I think would greatly help them. I personally, that stuff really, really matters to me. I think is the sway of fans and home court advantage. You see it a lot. I mean, sometimes a series will just be, home team 2. It's like it plays out like that. So
yeah, especially with the Lakers. I mean, there's not a bigger fan base in the NBA. Like, even if they played Milwaukee in the finals, I wouldn't feel super confident about like there not being 25% Laker fans there, just because we grew up in the 2000s where like it was Kobe and Shaq and they're just winning chips, and it's just like everybody's like Lakers. So there's just a fan base everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. We got to root against the Lakers just because you said that. I'm happy we're doing this. Do you guys want anything else? Do you want to share anything else about this, or do you guys?
I guess one fun question we could be like to end on would be like, if Kyrie and KD are healthy, let's assume 90% for both guys, where would you pencil them in this ranking? Okay, Jack's got number 1. Something we can agree on.
Probably should realize that this is also an audio platform, not just a video platform. But whenever I get a chance to do video things, I will do stupid video things. I think top 7 is as low as I would go.
They'd probably be in the tier with the Sixers and the Celtics and the Raptors.
Yeah, correct. So that's around that sort of 7 range. And to be honest, as high as 1. Kevin Durant's a Finals MVP, 2-time Finals MVP, and best player in the NBA. Proved that at the end of last year, before the injury, and then the season before that as well. Kevin Durant is a goddamn stud. I have no idea. We continue to hear news about him. Kyrie Irving as well. I trust Kyrie Irving as much as any of the players we've sort of spoken about when it comes to playoff level basketball, alongside a number 1 guy. He proved that like he was better than Stephen Curry in a lot of the series when he, hit the shot over him as well. He was probably the second best player in that entire series against Golden. And obviously, again, 4 years ago, plenty of
you had to play on the entire time.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So in that sort of sense, I think they could be as high as 1. Again, I'm drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, but at the end of the day, when you have Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and then you also have Caris LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, and Joe Harris. You have Joe Harris with those guys. But I honestly do think that Joe Harris would extremely benefit from that, as we did discuss with Nolan quite extensively on his season review. Yeah, they could be as high as 1. Honestly, that's not, I don't think, being too hyperbolic.
Are the Nets the only team, let's just hypothetically say if Kyrie and KD were healthy, that could have 4 different guys that were capable of dropping 40 on any given night?
Yes. Or maybe the Clippers, because I think Montrezl could have a big game where he just gets a million offensive rebounds. Lou Williams, Paul George, and Kawhi Leonard. That's probably the only, and I think that's what I see the Nets as. We see the Clippers at number one on both of your lists. I think the Nets at their best right now could be the Clippers.
Right.
Like they literally have depth aplenty when everyone is healthy, and they have two goddamn bona fide insane superstars.
And probably better center play. Like you feel more confident, at least. Like you could argue that, Harrell and Zubac are better or play better this season, but in a playoff series, like you might feel better about Jared Allen and DeAndre Jordan.
I'm going to go visually. I'm going to use the visual right here. Oh, no, I'm not. All right. I'm going to put him at 4. I definitely like him better.
The show. I'm coming back every week.
Yeah. I think they are, just because of the top end talent that they have, above the Raptors and the Celtics. I really want to put them above the Bucks. I really do. I'm a little worried they don't have a Giannis stopper, because that's probably who you're playing. Obviously you don't really ever get a Giannis stopper, but you at least want somebody that's going to show a little more resistance. Dare I say it, is Jared Allen their guy for that?
That's the guy that popped in my head right off the bat. Jared Allen's probably got the best athleticism in terms of like matching him stride for stride. And we've seen him block Giannis.
Yeah.
Like literally you can't name many centers in the NBA that have blocked Giannis on a real dunk attempt. Yeah, we've seen like the ones where they poke their hand in there, get like a tip on it. But like Jared Allen legitimately blocked him.
And like he not only that, like he was able to like make him pull it out. I don't know what game that was. That must have been their second game. I know it was in the second half of the season, but I'm a little worried about the matchup for them. Do you really? It feels. I'm trying not to touch on the injury thing too much. I really don't want to, but I just feel a little apprehensive about them being like, hey, we're going to throw KD at the 5 a lot this early on. We're not doing the fake trades thing. They're probably a move away, and I don't know if it would happen for them yet. So that's where I'm at. I wanted to give you guys the floor. Plug away, share things, tell us about yourselves. Be absolutely vain about this. This is your time.
Jack, you can find Jack and I on the Brooklyn Buzz, which you can find on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, OTGbasketball.com. Also can find myself on the NBA Outlet. Jack's frequently on there. And Jack, I know you do 2 other podcasts, so take it.
I do JBT with my fellow Aussie Nick brethren. So that one's out. That one's popping. We had a guest, Paul Headley, on that one. That was a lot of fun. And I'm also doing an Office podcast because Corey Waldron and I like to talk about The Office. We're doing fun things with it, trying to get a little bit funky and weird with it. But that one's fun. We do that every week as well. We're up to season 2, episode 7, I believe. We're going through the episodes. Might do relationship breakdowns, character breakdowns. On Twitter at the JMNJBT.
And you can find all these pods on OTGbasketball.com. And shout out to our writers who do an excellent job. We're doing a Mount Rushmore series right now. We'll also got something in the works, so make sure you follow OTG on Twitter at OTGbasketball.
Well done. You guys are great. I'm really happy we did this. I picked the right 2 guys to do this. This was very fun. We made a nice long show, and we definitely got to do this again. Maybe we'll update them as we get a little bit closer to the playoffs. Fingers crossed.
Please.
Gentlemen, thank you guys for coming on, and I will talk to you guys soon. We're always doing stuff together.
Appreciate it, Matt. Happy to be part of this.
Absolutely. Peace, guys.